Hello, I'm Jill Kaminsky, and I'm the Clinical Data System Analyst here at AvaSure. Thank you so much for joining me for this Lunch Bite presentation on ORNA. ORNA stands for Online Reporting of Nursing Analytics, and it's AvaSure's comparable database for telecity metrics. On a routine basis, data is loaded into ORNA from across the country from AvaSure participating sites. ORNA enables site leads to be able to compare their metrics on patient demographics, utilization, staff interventions, and adverse events. Let's take a look at some of the existing ORNA graphs and see how they might help you or other members of your telecity team. You can see when we enter or open up ORNA, we land right here on the landing page. The landing page is updated on the 5th of the month, so in our instance, it's available for September. There's some different metrics highlighted here on the landing page. The first one is utilization, patients discharged, or how many patients were monitored in September, how many near misses were prevented, what is the safety care unit of the month, and this is based on total monitoring hours for the month, stat alarm response time, stat alarms per patient day, and then verbal interventions per patient day. There's two things I would like to point out to you on this page. The first one is you can see our stat alarm response time is in red. There was an article published in 2019 by Dr. Pat Quigley, Lizbeth Botruba of AvaSure, and myself, and we found statistical significance evidence that any stat alarm response time higher than 19.2 seconds would indicate a higher risk of a fall in a patient. So we just wanted to color code this stat alarm response time green, yellow, and red just to draw your attention to the higher stat alarm response times. The other thing I want to point out is you can see if we hover over these different metrics, I get this little finger that points. If I click on any of these metrics, it brings me directly to the graph that's associated with it. And then if I click on the word ORNA in the upper left-hand corner, I am brought back to the landing page. So that is the landing page. Let's go ahead and take a look at patient demographics. Patient demographics is the very start of why a patient is being placed onto a device. This handoff from the nurse to the monitor staff is crucial with communication. It's so important the nurse lets the monitor staff know exactly why the patient needs a device and what they're being monitored for. The possible adverse events is the first step into admitting a patient. What is the risk that we're concerned about with this patient? You can see here for my site, falls is the top bar, and all of the ORNA participating comparable sites is the bottom bar. This up here, national average, like I said, we're defaulting to all the ORNA comparison. If I click on this, you can see there's several other different types of hospitals that we can compare ourselves against. The next step in admitting a patient is to figure out the patient conditions. So what type of conditions does the patient have that identifies them to be at this risk? Are they a post-op delirium patient, so they're a fall risk? Are they maybe in substance withdrawal, so they might be a staph injury risk? And then lastly, we have our patient risk factors. So this just helps the monitor staff know a little bit about the patient's risk personality. You can see here the impulsivity is the highest risk factor comparison for the ORNA sites. What these three different admission criteria tell us is basically the path of what the patient needs the monitoring device for. They might be a fall patient because they have delirium and they're impulsive. That helps the monitor staff know a little bit more about the patient's personality. The next area that we want to take a look at is the utilization. The utilization graph is kind of exciting to look at every month because it helps the site know how many devices they're monitoring month after month. You can see here that AvaSure has placed a 90% target average. There's really no comparison data here because every site has their own utilization goal. AvaSure obviously recommends 90%, so we're just going to keep the target line there. The next area I want to draw your attention to is total monitoring hours. And you can see here, we've always had total monitoring hours per care unit. This tells us how many hours each care unit is using the devices. The ORNA engineers have been busy working on a new graph that is now total monitoring hours per device. Many sites have requested this graph so they could keep track of their utilization based on the device name or the different types of devices they have, if it's a mobile or a ceiling mount. This new graph has been rolled out into ORNA production, so if you're a current ORNA subscriber, this graph is available to you now. I also want to point out another new feature to ORNA subscribers, and it's this down here in the lower left-hand corner. If you take a look, we have average and sum. This is just a new calculation that lets us know the data on the screen. We're averaging 352 patients for the last 3 months, and the sum is 1,055 patients. Again, this feature is out in ORNA right now, so if you're a subscriber, it's available to you. The third section I want to take you to is the stat alarm response time. This section tells the program manager how often their staff are verbally interacting with the patients or how many stat alarms are being issued. Additionally, we're able to see how long it's taking clinical staff to respond to the stat alarms. Keep an eye on that stat alarm response time, as higher stat alarms do indicate an increased risk of falls, dislodging a device, or perhaps a staff member is in need of assistance because there might be a physical or verbal abuse situation in the room. Lastly, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the falls prevented, or this is the adverse events prevented. Each time a monitor staff feels that their stat alarm or their verbal intervention may have prevented an adverse event, this is where they're graphed. Suppose I'm monitoring Betty, and Betty just swung her legs over the bed and started to scooch to the end. And I voiced in and said, Betty, put your legs back into bed. Do you need to use the restroom? I can call your nurse for you. So Betty complies, puts her legs in, and the nurse is called. I might think as a monitor staff, whew, I just prevented a fall, and I document it in the software. This is where the adverse events prevented are documented. We document them as a rate on this first graph so that we can get comparable data across the other ORNA participating hospitals. We also have a graph that's just strictly the raw number of events at your site. I want to stop sharing my screen there for a second and just talk to you real quickly that many of our sites are benefiting from ORNA Auto Upload. This feature allows the ORNA data to be uploaded every 24 hours into ORNA. If you're a site that's currently getting data in ORNA monthly and you want to benefit from getting data every 24 hours, reach out to your clinical program specialist or orna@avasure.com. This feature is included in your subscription and there's no additional cost. I want to share one more thing with you here. And it's the ORNA roadmap. So where are we going with ORNA? We discussed the new graph, which is the total monitoring hours per device, and the new feature, which is the average and the summation. But there's two new graphs that are also on the roadmap the ORNA engineers are working on. The first one is a sitter comparison. This will allow, or program leads are going to be allowed to enter or be able to enter their one-to-one sitter hours into the software. What ORNA is going to do then is take those one-to-one sitter hours and graph them compared to their telesitting hours. So we can keep track on trends to see our one-to-one sitter hours going down, telesitting going up, or the other inverse way. The other graph is the validated adverse events. We talked a little bit about the adverse events prevented graphs that are already in ORNA, but many people are wondering, where are my adverse event graphs? In order to be able to graph those in ORNA, we need to make sure that we have true, positive, clean adverse event data. So we're going to be able to validate, or program leads will be able to validate those adverse events in the software, and then we'll be able to graph them in ORNA. We'll graph them as a rate per AvaSure monitoring days, and also just the number of events like we have with the adverse events. This is going to be a huge time saver, I think, for a lot of people at the site, so you won't have to export this every month. Well, I know that was a lot of information, and thank you for sticking with me. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your clinical program specialist at AvaSure, or you can email us anytime at orna@avasure.com. I hope you have a great day, and thank you.